My fiancé said, "My parents think you're not visionary enough. We need space." I replied, "I understand." Then I transferred my share from the joint account we opened for the wedding she had already secretly canceled. Her break turned into a permanent and very expensive lesson. My name is Felix. I'm 32 years old and I live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, decent pay, not flashy. My fiancée, Lillian, is 29, a luxury furniture designer with an eye for rare woods and glossy catalogs. We'd been together for 4 years, planning to get married this spring. It was a dreary Wednesday when Lillian showed up unannounced at my apartment. The sky outside was that endless New York gray, like the world couldn't be bothered to pick a side between rain and just staying miserable. I was working from home, hunched over my laptop at the kitchen table, when I heard her key in the lock. She walked in slowly, her lips pressed tight, like she'd practiced what she was about to say in the mirror. Her fingers kept twisting her sapphire engagement ring around and around until I thought she'd wear the stone down to dust. I stood up, feeling the tension crawl up my neck. "Hey, Lil," I said, trying to keep it normal. "What's going on?" She took a deep breath and sat down across from me. Her eyes flicked to the window, anywhere but at me. "Felix, I think we need to take a break," she said finally. Her voice sounded rehearsed, too even, like she'd been coached on how to say it. My heart sank, but I didn't let it show. I've always had this thing about control, not in a manipulative way, just in the sense of not letting people see me sweat. I sat back down, folding my hands in front of me. "A break?" I asked, steady as I could. She nodded quickly, her fingers still spinning that ring. "My parents, they're worried. They think you're not visionary enough for the life I want." I let out a slow breath, watching her carefully. Malcolm and Celeste Windsor, art collectors, trust fund old money, and the kind of people who looked at my job like it was a polite hobby. They never said it to my face, but I'd always felt it. I'd always been this temporary amusement in their eyes. A nice phase, as Malcolm once called my career at some dinner party when he thought I wasn't listening. "And what do you think?" I asked, tilting my head. She flinched. Just a tiny movement, but I saw it. I need some space," she said. "I've been thinking about this a lot. I need to figure out if we're really meant for each other." There it was. The line I'd heard other guys talk about when their fiancés got cold feet. I stared at her, feeling this mix of calm and something like resignation. I didn't yell, didn't beg. That's not me. "All right," I said, after a long moment. "If that's what you need, Lil, I won't stand in your way." She looked relieved, but also surprised, like she expected me to fight back. Instead, I stood up and walked to the window, watching a couple of pigeons huddle together on the fire escape. It was easier than watching her. Inside, though, my mind was racing. Lillian wasn't the type to make a decision like this overnight. If she was calling for a break today, something had happened already. Maybe it was her parents pushing her. Maybe something else. But it wasn't just her needing space. I could feel that in my gut. She stood up too, brushing imaginary lint off her coat. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't want it to be like this." "Yeah," I said quietly, turning to face her. "Me neither." She left not long after, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The apartment felt bigger without her in it, emptier somehow. I didn't move for a while. I just stood there, staring at that door, feeling the weight of everything we'd built together, all the wedding plans, the Sunday morning coffee runs, the laughter we used to share. All of it suddenly cracked, like thin ice under my feet. In that silence, I realized something. She wasn't just asking for space. She was following orders. Orders that didn't have anything to do with me and everything to do with the world she'd grown up in. The Windsor world of curated perfection, and I'd always been an imperfect piece. But I wasn't going to beg her to stay. If she needed space, I'd give it to her. And I'd keep my eyes open for whatever came next. A couple days after Lillian left, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the joint wedding account we'd set up months ago. It had seemed like a good idea at the time. We were supposed to be building a future together, not just paying for a party. $60,000 sat there, bright white numbers on the screen. Half of that was mine, half was hers. I scrolled through the transactions, half hoping I'd find something to make me feel better. Maybe she'd just gotten scared. Maybe she was still as invested as I was. But the longer I stared, the more I realized how naive that sounded. I needed answers. So I called the vineyard venue we'd booked for the wedding. I told the manager, a sweet older woman named Marla, that I was calling to make a few changes to the seating chart. It felt weird, the lie sitting heavy in my mouth, but I needed to know. "Oh, Felix," Marla said, her voice bright and warm. "Actually, I was just about to reach out to you too. Lillian called last week and canceled everything." I blinked, the words slow to land. "She canceled? The whole thing?" "Yes," she said. "It was a complete cancellation. We processed it immediately." "I'm so sorry. It was such a beautiful date you picked out." Marla's voice was sympathetic, but all I heard was the echo of her words. Complete cancellation. No mention of a break. No mention of needing space. She'd called it off before she ever walked into my apartment and told me she needed time. And the deposit? I asked, my voice calm even though my chest felt like it was caving in. I'm afraid it was non-refundable, she said gently. $10,000, already processed. I thanked her and hung up, the phone feeling like a brick in my hand. I sat back, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I just heard. She'd canceled the wedding the day before she told me she needed space. She didn't tell me because she didn't think she had to. I felt this cold clarity settle over me, washing away the last of the numbness. It wasn't about the money, even though that stung. It was about what it meant. The wedding was never happening. She'd made that choice alone, while I was still sitting here like some lovesick kid. I stood up and paced the apartment, the words rattling around in my head. All those late nights we spent talking about colors and cake flavors and guest lists, all of it was a lie. She'd already made up her mind. She just didn't have the guts to tell me until she'd secured her exit. In that moment, I felt like I was looking at the world through new eyes. No more illusions. No more hoping. Just the facts. Lillian had chosen her family's world over ours, and she'd done it quietly, efficiently, like everything else in her life. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. Not really. Anger would have meant I still cared. But something in me shifted. Like I'd been walking around in a fog and finally saw the edges of it. That was the day I stopped believing in our wedding. In her promises. In the idea that love could be enough when money and status were on the other side of the scale. I took a screenshot of the cancellation notice in my email, just to have it. Just in case she ever tried to spin this as something else. I needed that proof for myself, not to fight her, not to win, but to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that I'd seen it all with my own eyes. I closed the wedding fund app and sat down on the couch. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know what I'd say to her if she came back. But I knew one thing for sure, whatever came next, I was done being the guy who waited for someone else to decide if I was enough. The next morning, I sat down at my computer, a steaming cup of coffee in my hand, the wedding fund page still open from the night before. $50,000 sat there, a neat little number that felt more like a monument to everything that had just gone up in smoke. I took a breath and thought about what I needed to do. No more second-guessing. No more waiting for Lillian or her parents to decide what was fair. Half of that money was mine, money I'd earned working overtime, fixing broken engines and sweating through endless summer heat in the shop. Money that had nothing to do with her family's idea of vision. I logged into the account and went through the steps: withdrawal, confirmation, security question. My hands were steady the whole time. It wasn't about revenge. It was about what I was owed. $25,000. My share. My half. I transferred it to my own account and closed the laptop with a soft click. The apartment was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the old wall clock, each second a reminder that I was moving forward, piece by piece. After that, I pulled out my phone and typed out a text to Lillian. I kept it simple. No flowery language. No need to make her feel better or worse. Just the facts. Lillian, I know you canceled the wedding before our talk. I've withdrawn my half of the fund, and I'm done. I wish you well, but this is goodbye. I stared at the message for a moment before hitting send. It felt final. It felt like a door closing, not slammed, not with anger, just quietly shut. I didn't wait for her reply. I didn't care if she had excuses or apologies. I blocked her number, then her parents too. I didn't need to hear what they thought of me, or how I should be a gentleman and let her keep the money. My half was mine. Hers was hers. That was it. Afterward, I stood up and walked around the apartment. It felt different already, like it was finally just mine again. No more ghost of a wedding that was never going to happen. I put the engagement ring in a small box and tucked it away in the back of a drawer. Maybe one day I'd sell it. Or maybe I'd just keep it as a reminder of what I'd survived. That was the thing. I didn't feel like I'd won anything, but I felt like I'd stopped losing. And that was enough for now. I took another sip of my coffee, listening to the faint buzz of traffic outside. It felt like the start of something new. Not better, not worse, just real. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. A couple days later, my phone started buzzing again. Not from Lillian. I'd blocked her. But there's always a way around that if someone's determined enough. The first text was from a number I didn't recognize. Just 3 words. We need to talk. I stared at it for a second before deleting it. I knew who it was. I knew what it would be about. The next morning, an email showed up. From Celeste Windsor herself, dripping with that syrupy, polished tone she'd always used when she wanted to sound gracious. But really, it was just condescending. Felix, it began, I'm so sorry to hear about the cancellation. Lillian is heartbroken, and I'm sure you are too. However, I must say I was deeply disappointed to learn you withdrew your half of the wedding funds. A gentleman wouldn't leave a lady to bear such a burden alone. Please reconsider. I closed the email without replying. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. part of me wanting to send back a single line. A gentleman doesn't steal from himself. But I didn't. I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their world of polite threats and expectations. That evening, another number popped up on my phone. It was Lillian again, but through some burner app. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Her messages came in a flood. "You're being cruel. I thought we could handle this like adults. You're taking this so personally. It's just money. My parents are right. You're not a gentleman. How can you just walk away after everything we shared?" I didn't reply. She sent more paragraphs of accusations and thinly veiled insults, like she was trying to find the one that would make me feel guilty enough to come crawling back. But all I felt was tired. Finally, I did respond. Once, I typed out a short, clear email and sent it to her family's address, copying Lillian so they couldn't twist it. "I'm sorry you're upset, but you canceled the wedding before you told me you needed space. I simply took back what was mine. I have all the records to prove it. I wish you well, but I'm done." After I hit send, I blocked every new number that came in. I didn't want to hear it anymore. Not the fake concern, not the guilt trips, not the moral lectures about what I owed them. Because the truth was, I didn't owe them anything. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, my phone finally silent again. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that I'd been so focused on trying to be enough for them, for Lillian, for her parents, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just be enough for myself. I leaned back on the couch, closed my eyes, and let the quiet settle around me. It felt like breathing clean air after being stuck in a smoky room. A few days later, a thin envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the careful, spidery handwriting right away. Lillian's. Inside were a stack of invoices, all neat and precise, like they'd been prepared by an accountant. The florist, the calligrapher, the custom wedding dress. She had itemized every last expense, all of it dated after she'd already canceled the wedding behind my back. A note was clipped to the top. "Since you've taken half the fund, I expect you to cover your share of these costs." I sat there in my kitchen, reading it twice, my mind surprisingly calm. The invoices were impressive, not just in the sheer amount, but in the timing. The dress she claimed was a shared expense had been ordered after she'd already told me she needed space. The florist? Hired a week after the venue was canceled. The calligrapher? I had a feeling they'd never even been contacted. I grabbed my laptop and started pulling up the wedding fund records. I still had access to the account. I went through every transaction, matching them against her invoices. And just like I suspected, her numbers didn't line up. She was trying to turn me into the villain, the one who walked away and left her holding the bag. But the truth was, she'd kept spending after she'd already ended it. Spending for a wedding that wasn't even happening. I took a breath, the cold clarity settling in. She wasn't just trying to get money back. She was rewriting the story, making it look like I was the one who broke the deal, the one who left her in the lurch. But I wasn't going to let her do that. I drafted an email, attaching screenshots of the account records, the dates of the cancellations, the proof that she'd kept spending after the fact. I didn't accuse her. I didn't attack her. I just laid out the facts, calm and clear. "Lillian," I wrote, "I've reviewed your invoices. Many of these expenses were incurred after you canceled the wedding. I will not be paying for costs you took on after the wedding was already called off. Please do not contact me further." I read it over once, then hit send. Afterward, I blocked her email too. I didn't want her to have any more avenues to twist the truth. I sat back and exhaled. The apartment was quiet around me, the only sound the steady drip of the coffee maker in the corner. For the first time, I felt like I'd finally shut down the fog she'd been trying to spread around me, the half-truths, the guilt, the shifting stories. I wasn't going to let her rewrite what happened. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. But I felt, still. And that was enough for now. A few days after sending that email, the silence I'd earned didn't last. Instead, the Windsors shifted tactics, turning to the one thing they knew best: appearances. They started working the edges of my life, trying to turn the people I cared about against me. It started with my mother. She called me one evening, her voice tight and confused. "Felix," she said, "Celeste Windsor called me today. She said you were being vindictive, that you took money you weren't entitled to." I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. "Did she tell you that Lillian canceled the wedding before she told me?" I asked calmly. There was a pause. "No," my mom said finally, sounding smaller. "She just said you were making things difficult for Lillian, that a real gentleman wouldn't abandon her like this." I could almost see Celeste rehearse smile, her syrupy tone wrapping around my mother like a noose. I didn't even feel angry, just tired. A couple days later, it was my cousin Julie texting me. "Hey, I just saw Damien Windsor's post on LinkedIn. He said you're refusing to pay your share of the wedding and that it's hurting Lillian. Are you okay?" I felt that cold clarity again. Lillian's brother, Damien, I always knew he'd find some way to spin this. I pulled up the post. There it was, A public rant about how true character is revealed in hard times, how some people hide behind legalities instead of standing up for what's right. My name wasn't there, but it didn't have to be. Everyone would know. I sat there for a minute, fingers hovering over my keyboard. Then I started documenting everything, screenshots of the wedding fund withdrawals, the email I'd sent Lillian with the timeline of her secret cancellation, the receipts for the dress she'd bought after she ended it. I didn't send them out. Not yet. But I saved them. I wasn't going to be caught flat-footed if this turned into something bigger. Then I made one last call. A lawyer I'd known since college, Nate. He'd handled some of my work contracts over the years, and I trusted him. When I laid out everything, the canceled wedding, the invoices, the family drama, he just listened, then said quietly, "You've got nothing to worry about, Felix. They're throwing stones in the dark. You've got the receipts." I let out a breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. "Thanks, Nate," I said. I want this to be over." He paused for a moment. "I know, and it will be. Just stay calm. Let them shout into the void. You don't owe them anything else." When I hung up, I realized something. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'd done everything right. I had nothing to hide. And that was what was going to keep me grounded, no matter how much they tried to twist the story. About a week after I talked to Nate, I came home to find a thick envelope slid under my apartment door. My heart sank the second I saw the Windsor family crest on the corner. I knew what it was before I even picked it up. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened it. It was a letter, long, dense, stuffed with legalese. A cease and desist from some fancy law firm the Windsors liked to keep on retainer. They claimed I was in breach of promise, had misused joint funds, and that I'd caused Lillian emotional distress and reputational harm. The phrase, potential legal action, was sprinkled throughout like some kind of threat confetti. I didn't panic. I didn't even get angry. I just felt steady. I pulled out my phone and called Nate again. When he picked up, I said, "You were right. They're trying to scare me into giving up my share." He let out a low whistle. "Send me the letter," he said. "We'll draft a response." That night, I sat at the table, the letter spread out in front of me, and I thought about everything I'd done to make this wedding happen. All the money, the weekends spent touring venues, the hours spent talking with Lillian about colors and flowers. I thought about how she'd called it off without even telling me, how she tried to keep spending afterward like it was her right. I thought about the lies she was trying to spin now. And I realized I wasn't afraid of her anymore, or of her family's money, or their lawyers. The next day, Nate sent the Windsor lawyer a response. It was clinical, factual, and left no room for argument. He attached the timeline, the wedding fund withdrawals, the emails confirming the venue cancellation, the invoices for things Lillian ordered after the wedding was already dead. He ended it with a simple line: "Our client is under no obligation to pay for expenses incurred unilaterally after the wedding was canceled." A few days later, Nate forwarded me the reply. It was short, almost sheepish. The lawyer said they would reconsider the matter and advise their client accordingly. In other words, they were backing down. They knew they had no case. They'd hoped I'd cave under the weight of their name, but I didn't. I wouldn't. I sat back in my chair and let the relief wash over me. I'd spent weeks feeling like I was standing in the middle of some storm I couldn't stop. But now I knew the truth was enough. That my calm and my quiet determination had done more to protect me than any lawyer ever could. I put the letter away, not because I needed to hide it, but because I didn't need it anymore. The threat was gone, and so was the last hold Lillian's family had over me. A couple weeks later, I decided to unblock Lillian for a single day, not because I wanted to talk to her, or because I needed closure, but because I wanted to face her one last time on my terms. To see if there was any part of her that still remembered what we were, or if she was fully lost to her family's illusions. She called that same evening, her number lighting up my phone. I answered on the first ring, my voice calm. "Hello, Felix," she said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "Felix, how could you just cut me out like this? I don't understand. I thought we were going to build a life together." I stayed silent for a moment, listening to her sobs. The performance, the desperation. It sounded real enough, but I'd learned the difference between real and rehearsed a long time ago. "I didn't cut you out, Lillian," I said softly. "You ended it when you canceled the wedding before you ever talked to me. That was because I was scared," she cried. "My parents were pressuring me. I didn't know what to do. I thought you'd understand. I thought you'd wait for me to figure it out." I closed my eyes, feeling the last of my sympathy fade. I did understand. I understood the minute I saw that you'd canceled everything without even telling me. You didn't want a partner. You wanted someone to take the fall for your choices. She sniffled loudly, her breathing ragged. "You're being so cold. You're acting like none of it mattered. Like I didn't love you." "Love doesn't come with invoices and accusations," I said quietly. "You spent money on a wedding you'd already decided wasn't happening. And then you tried to make me pay for it. That's not love, Lillian. That's using someone." There was a long pause. I could hear her trying to find the right words, the right angle. Felix, please, don't do this. We can still fix it. We can still. No, I said simply. I don't want to fix anything. I don't want to be part of this anymore. I could almost hear her shoulders slump on the other end of the line. So that's it, she whispered. You're just done. I'm done, I said. I hope one day you find what you're really looking for. But it's not me. She didn't say anything else. And I didn't either. I hung up, then blocked her number for the final time. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of it all settle in my chest. The sadness was still there, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was just quiet, like a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Because I knew, whatever she was still searching for in me, she'd never find it. And I'd stopped trying to give it. About a month later, I started hearing things through the grapevine. Mutual friends who hadn't taken sides, people I used to see at dinner parties with Lillian, even Amy, her best friend and maid of honor. Quiet messages that trickled in like whispers in a crowded room. I heard Lillian moved back in with her parents. Back to that cold, elegant house on the Upper East Side, where the walls were lined with paintings worth more than most people's homes. Back to the world that had always been waiting for her to come home, until she found a way to make it work without me. It turned out the wedding expenses she'd tried to pin on me were all on her personal credit cards. She hadn't told her parents how much she'd spent, how she'd kept shopping and spending after she'd already decided there wouldn't be a wedding at all. The florist, the dress, the calligrapher, all of it, on her name alone. Word spread fast. Some of the vendors she ghosted started talking about how she'd promised payments she never made, how she'd left them scrambling when they realized the Windsor wedding was never happening. One of them even called me, their voice nervous, just trying to figure out if they'd ever see the money. I told them the truth. Calm, clear. I'm sorry, but I'm not involved anymore. I wish you luck. I think that's when it really sank in for me how much of this was always about the performance for her. The show she wanted to put on, no matter how high the cost. And once the show was canceled, the debts were hers alone. One afternoon, I got a quiet message from Amy. I'm sorry, she wrote. I didn't know everything that was going on. I should have seen it sooner. I didn't need the apology, but it felt like a small light in the darkness, a reminder that maybe not everyone in that circle was as blind as I thought. Lillian didn't reach out again. Her parents didn't either. But I knew they were feeling the cracks in their perfect world. I could almost see it. The quiet dinners at that long, marble table, Lillian's credit card statements sitting in a neat stack beside her mother's wine glass. The perfect picture they tried to keep up, crumbling in the silence. I didn't take joy in it. I didn't want revenge. But there was a certain peace in knowing the truth had a way of coming out, even when people tried to bury it. Lillian's choices were finally catching up to her, not because of me, but because of the weight of her own actions. And me? I was done carrying any of it. I'd spent enough time trying to be the man she wanted. I didn't need to watch her downfall to know I was better off without her. It's been about 6 months since Lillian walked out of my apartment and left the pieces of our wedding scattered in the dust. I've had time to think, to sit with everything that happened, and I've realized that anger doesn't burn forever. It turns to something else, something quieter. A wary kind of wisdom, maybe. I've dated a bit since then. Nothing serious. Drinks after work, a few dinners that turned into long conversations. But every time I feel that old flicker of hope, that spark of something deeper, I find myself pulling back. Not because I'm still in love with Lillian, that door's been closed and locked, but because I'm different now. I don't give myself away so easily. The engagement ring is still here. It's in a small velvet box in the back of my dresser drawer. I don't look at it much, but I haven't sold it either. I guess I'm not sure if it's a reminder or a warning or maybe both. I heard Lillian's living with her parents full-time now. She's trying to fix her credit from what Amy told me. The vendors she ghosted are still chasing her down, and there's no one left to hide behind. She's alone in that marble world she fought so hard to stay in, and I'm not part of the story anymore. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I wonder if she thinks of me, if she regrets what she did, or if she still believes the story she told herself, that I wasn't enough for the life she wanted. But those thoughts don't last long. They're like ghosts that show up at the edge of my mind, then slip away just as quickly. I don't take any joy in her downfall. That was never what this was about. I'm not the kind of person who wants to see someone fail just because they hurt me. I know what I'm worth now. And that's not something you can measure in wedding deposits or floral arrangements. I've started spending more time in the shop again. My job's always been a kind of therapy, the quiet hum of machinery, the satisfaction of fixing something broken and making it work again. I think I needed that after everything, just to remind myself that there are some things you can control, some things that can be rebuilt. The rage is gone. All that's left is a sort of stillness. And I've realized that's enough. Because in the end, dignity isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about standing your ground and refusing to let someone else's betrayal define who you are. I still believe in love. I still believe in second chances, in people trying to do better. But I also believe in protecting myself, and knowing when to walk away and when to stand firm. So that's where I am now. Moving forward, not triumphantly, but intact. And in a world that can take so much from you, that's the quiet victory that matters most.